Okay, so we got the shell off here. We're getting ready to put, actually I already did put Loksound on it here. So a couple things I want to go over. The install is very similar to that of the ES44s, which I've showed in previous videos. So I'm not going to repeat myself on a lot of it here, but there are a couple differences. First off, in the back here, I was very optimistic when I originally saw this because on the, let me get the rear light board out of the way here. On the rear ditch light harness, there's actually two brown wires there and one purple wire. That's a little bit different than the ES44s, which basically only have one wire for both the positive and the negative. So I thought 2 wires, well, maybe we can do flashing ditch lights in the back. Well, the problem with that is that the brown wires, which there's 2 of, are actually positive. And then the pink or the purple wire here is actually the negative, so it shares a ground, but there's 2 separate positive. That kind of works backwards from typically the way most DCC works, and that the positive is always on and constant, and then your lights are actually triggered on and off by the negative wires. So since this is backwards, that doesn't really work. There's a couple different ways that you could overcome that. Probably the easiest is simply removing this entire thing and putting in new ditch lights with surface mount LEDs. That's certainly an option. I didn't really want to do that. At some future point maybe I will, but for right now I didn't want to do that. A relay perhaps also is another option to flip the polarity. Problem with that is the reaction of it may change the flash rate of these. Also, it's a lot of space trying to fit a relay into the shell. Probably a little bit more work than what you need to do. So there's some different ways of doing it. I chose to basically have kind of a steady state rear ditch light. How I did it on the ES44s was I maintained the purple wire here, just connected up to the factory. So we only cut previously the brown wire, which is coming off the rear ditch light harness here, and typically this end I was just wiring into the rear headlight lead there so that it would just come on with the rear headlights. That's one way you can do it. It's pretty quick and easy. There's probably a little bit better way, which I did this time, and I may actually refit a couple of my ES44s this way. So the other way of doing it is the purple wire here, which is your ground. Ran that off auxiliary 4 on the decoder, which is typically how these are set up off the box. Typically auxiliary 4 is your ditch lights. That's how Intermountain does it on their GEVOs. And then to get a positive, you can get that from a couple different places. You can get it off the blue wire up front here. You can get it off the front of the decoder where the blue wire is. Another option is actually on the back here. Try to zoom in on this. Well, the very first pin here on the back, you have to trim off a little bit of the insulation here. But the very first pin is actually a common positive lead. So I used that. Typically they have these little solder pads on the back here to do keep alives, or what ESU calls the power packs. So you can use actually that as just your common positive. So got my positive and negative there, and that's how the ditch lights are ran. So they're actually run off the aux4. So the beauty of that is that when you turn off F6 and you're just backing up the locomotive, only the rear headlight will turn on. So the ditch lights are independently controlled as opposed to just being stuck on with the rear headlight. So a little bit more better control there. Some things you want to watch with these is because you do have to cut some of the insulation off the decoder here, I'm just going to put a piece of electrical tape around that to make sure that these pins aren't sticking out and hitting into anything. Also on the bottom here, from the factory, MTH doesn't have anything which basically goes over this. I elect to put a little piece of electrical tape over that just to make sure that it doesn't ground out on anything, because there's actually a little weight that goes in there. I just want to make sure that that doesn't ground out on anything when it's touching down there. Also, one other thing, and we'll show it here in a second, is that when this is all buttoned up and getting ready to go back together, The shell has a little bit less tolerance as far as flexibility. Everything is kind of built a little bit more tightly with this one, so it's a little bit harder to take the shells on and off. The GEVOs are pretty forgiving. They have a lot of free space to them, so they go on and off pretty easy. These, you got to really make sure that all of your wires are tucked down, that you're not having anything sticking out that can get stuck. So we're going to take a pause here, and I'm going to button everything back up, and we'll get the shell back on. Okay, so everything's kind of back together here, and what I did was I just kind of fixed the decoder down in the back here. You don't have to put it right here, you can put it up here. There's enough space to do it there. For the time being, I kind of just elected to put them back here. At a future point, and maybe which I put a keep alive in, I'll probably put that back here and then move the decoder up front. One other thing I do want to mention, this applies to both the ES44s and also the MTH HO-9s, and that's the there's two sets of wires here. These up front here, these are the motor wires. Initially, sometimes you have to actually take off the light board here, as well as this front weight and also the front light board in order to access a lot of the wires that you need to, which I've covered in other videos on how you do the front ditch light wiring for these. But one thing you do want to watch with actually both sets of these wires is you want to make sure that they're tucked up tight and out of the way of the flywheels. If these tap into the flywheels at all, they make a horrendous grinding noise, and it will drive you absolutely nuts. So you want to make sure that those are taped up or fixed up in a way that they're not going to actually move over into the flywheels, because it's just going to cause a horrible noise. And then possibly if you leave it alone that way, then eventually eat through the wires and you may short out something and cause some real damage. So make sure that everything is tucked up and tidy, that you don't really have any wires sticking out anywhere that can get kind of bogged down when the shell snaps back on here. So next we'll put on the shell, and then we'll actually do some running here, and you can listen to some of the awesome sounds on this decoder. Okay, so it's time to run it here. So I have the sound turned off right now, but we'll listen to the engine start up in just a bit. But I have F5 here set to the number boards. And of course 0 is your headlight. And then we got the ditch lights. Alright, so let's start it up. F1, of course, is your bell. Then I have the K5LA set to the horn here. And of course we have the correct flashing ditch lights there for that also. Got your coupler clank, dynamic brakes, and 7's the dimmer. Can't really tell too much. F8, of course, mutes it. F9 is going to notch it up here. Then we'll hit F10 to bring it back down. And we got F11 for our radiator fans. Something sort of cool that I've been playing around with is these actually do have the Doppler effect built into it. So I have F12 set up to do that. Well, I guess not. Anyways, we'll get into running it here. And of course with F6 now I can actually turn off the ditch lights. Couldn't do that before the way I had it wired up off the rear headlight. But of course they don't flash. So the only real way to do that is if you're just wiring up completely new ditch lights. Like I said, I'm not going to do that right now. And of course the slow speed control is fantastic as usual, so no great surprise there. Okay, so there you have it. You saw the insides of it. You saw it in there in action. Very well done. Probably my only real disappointment with this locomotive is the way the rear ditch lights are wired up. So it's not a problem that's impossible to overcome. I mean, I could certainly wire up brand new ditch lights in both the front and rear. So that's an option. I kind of like the look of the factory ones. That's probably not something I'm going to do right now. Another option out there, if you don't want to deal with any of this at all, is to simply buy the Protosound 3 version. So with that, I mean, the ditch lights work correctly in both the front and rear. Sound's already on it, so you don't have to worry about installing anything. It does come out a little bit less in cost also than what building one of these does. So you got to figure when you're building one of these, as I did, some of the cost and components is, of course, the engine itself. You have to buy the Loksound Select decoder. And also 2 TCS WOW speakers. I use the 28mm ones. I use those in my ES44s. Very happy with the results of it in this one as well. They sound pretty good in here. I'm sure there's other 28mm speakers out there. I've found probably my best results with the TCS. So that's probably what I'm going to stick with moving forward. So, I mean, I'm certainly going to buy a couple more of these. Probably the Santa Fe, the Southern Pacific, and possibly another Norfolk Southern unit. I'm probably looking at the Operation Lifesaver scheme. I would buy another horse head, but they don't have any more at this point. So just one road number like this one, but overall, like I said, probably due to the disappointment of the rear ditch lights, I'd probably have to go back and say 8.5 out of 10. Just that one little miss there, but I think it's something that you could probably overcome. Like I said, if you had enough motivation to just go ahead and wire up brand new ditch lights. But I'll put in some of my CVs here. I found a pretty good setup for the front ditch lights as far as the flash rates go, so I think I got those pretty close. I mean, feel free to use your own settings. I'll put mine out there. I'm by no means an expert on this type of stuff, but I think I have a pretty good starting point, especially if it's something you've never dove into before, so I think I can get you pretty close. But, I mean, you're welcome to play around and try different things with these. I'm just putting this info out there so that, you know, more people can use it. Maybe not shy away from these locomotives. I know a lot of people don't like MTH, and, you know, I can understand some of the frustration there. I've had pretty good results from them. Dealing with them over the phone's not always the best experience. I've tried to get some parts from them in the past. I'm still waiting. Just never heard back from them. But, I mean, overall, as long as you get one that has all the parts included, most of the time it's going to be a pretty good locomotive for you. So that's all for this one. Got some projects coming up. They're not MTH, I promise. I know I've been a little bit heavy on the MTH lately, but they've put out a lot of locomotives that I really enjoy because I'm kind of a big GE wide cab guy. That's kind of my thing. I have a ton of these locomotives. I like them. I have some variety. I've actually gone back and done some different things with my Kato SD80 Max. So there'll be some videos on those coming up here soon. So that's all for this one.